So today I want to cover modulation, and actually we'll talk specifically about a specific kind of modulation called common chord, or used to be called pivot chord modulation. And I'll explain to you what that is. But modulation is basically moving from one key to another key, right? And that's actually the norm. Like in Harmony 1, we tend to study a lot of stuff that just stays in the same key throughout, you know? But the norm for music is to go to different keys because it's just kind of boring staying in one key the whole time, right? So, just so you know, like that's kind of the way things go in terms of modulation. Most of the time, most music does modulate at some point. Some modulations are simplistic and not so interesting, and other modulations are more intricate, more complicated. But we're going to talk about these common chord modulations. But first of all, just to talk kind of basically about modulation, when we modulate, typically we modulate to what are called closely related keys. And those are keys that are one sharp or one flat away from the original key. So if we think of something like C major, right? One sharp away would be going to G major, right? We would go to the dominant. And one flat away would be F major, which would be the subdominant. And the reason we go to these keys is because they're closely related, because they're easy to get to. It's easier to go more smoothly from, zero sharps to one sharp, zero flats to one flat. And then in addition to the one sharp major and the one sharp minor, we can also go to any of the related majors or minors. So from C major to A minor, from C major to E minor, from C major to D minor are also possible. All of those are one sharp or one flat away from the original key. And this is true of any key. So if we were in A major, we could go to E major, which would be the dominant. We could go to D major, which would be the subdominant. And we could go to the related minors. So we could go from A major, which is 3 sharps, to F sharp minor, which is 3 sharps. We could go to B minor, which is 2 sharps. We could go to C sharp minor, which is 4 sharps. All those things are possible in terms of modulation. Okay? So again, usually closely related keys. And this is the way, again, like if we're talking about, well, first we have to have tonal music, so we're talking about, early Baroque, maybe, although even that's achieved even earlier than that. But so once we have tonal centers and not really like modalities and kind of a more open field in terms of that, then we're modulating to, again, closely related keys. And one of the most typical would be going to the dominant, because that's just kind of the easiest to get there. So if we're talking about what are called a common chord modulation, then we would look at the chords in the 2 different keys. So let's say we're talking about C major. These are the triads that are in C major, right? Maybe we should have sketched these out in advance, but... And then in G major, these are our triads. And this is our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And in G major, same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So when we're doing what is called a common chord modulation, we're looking for a chord that is going to work in both keys, that we can use as a way of moving into that new key, and then we would take that chord and reinterpret it in the new key and move forward. And so that's why it's also called, or has been called, a pivot chord modulation. In the harmony textbook, they call it a common chord modulation because it's common to both keys. But we used to call it a pivot chord modulation. If somebody else uses that terminology, so you know that's what it means. It's the same thing. It's the idea of finding a chord and then moving it, pivoting on that to go into the new key. So then we want to look at chords that we have in both of those keys. And let me use a different pin for this part, different color. So if we're looking at chords, like let's say we're in C major and we want to go to G major. The one chord is a possible common chord, right? Because it is what is 1 in C major is 4 in G major. The 1 in C major is a little bit tricky because if you're in C major, that's the tonic, and so it's harder to use that as a common chord. Common chords tend to be more ambiguous in terms of their function. So if you want to think about, again, like I was talking last time about getting somebody lost, so you want to get the listener a little bit lost first and then pivot, rather than being in the tonic and then pivoting, right? So, but it's a possible common chord, If we look at the 2 chord, that doesn't work, right? Because the D triad in C has a sharp in it, is a major triad. So we can't use this as a common chord to modulate. We can use this because the E minor triad is the 6th chord here, so we could do that one. We can't use the F major triad, right, because it's not at all the key of G major, so that's no good. The G major triad is also possible, right? It's the 5 here and the 1 there, so possible. But also, again, the idea that the 5 is going to take us back to the dominant is a little bit more defined, but possible because it's common between the 2. The A minor triad works because it's 6 here and the 2 here. And then the 7 diminished is not going to work because of the F natural that's there, and it's not common because it's not part of this chord. So we're left with the 1, the 3, the 5, the 6 as possible common chords to get to G major. And so the way that would work would be, let's say I'm in C major and I'm doing some just plain old C major stuff. I do a 1 and maybe a 2, 6, and then a 5, and then back to 1 again. And then I do the 6th chord, which is the A minor triad in C major. And then I reinterpret that in G major as being a 2 chord, and then I proceed forward in G major. So after that, after 2 in G major would come 5, and this is how we notate it, by the way, in terms of a modulation. But after 2 would come 5, and then 1, and then I'd be in G major, right? And so the common chord must work in terms of both progressions. It must make sense in terms of my progression in C major. Oops, I forgot. C major here. And then it must also make sense in terms of my progression in, G major. In other words, I couldn't just say, okay, I'm using the A minor triad as a common chord, and then now I'm going to do 2, 1 in G major. Yay, because 2 to 1 is not a valid progression in G major. Or I couldn't do 2, 6. That's not a progression that we use, right? We don't go from 2 to 6 in this new key. So the common chord, in terms of its placement in the progression, must make sense in terms of the key that you're coming from and the key that you're going to. What would be another way of pivoting from C major to G major? What's another chord that I can?
Minor, the 3rd.
The 3? Yeah. So let's say I'm in C major, and again I'm going to do 1, 4, 5, 1, just to kind of establish the key. Here I am. And probably the most likely place to get to the 3 is going to be from the 1, because remember the 3 is the most. So then I could say 3, and then I would reinterpret that in G major. And what is that going to be in G major?
The 6?
The 6, right? So the E minor triad, the 3 in C major becomes the 6 in G major. So then I say, okay, now this is the 6th chord, and then I'm going to do 2, how about 4? 4, 5, 1 in G major, something like that. Or even like 5, 7. So if I'm in C major, doing C major like type stuff, and then I go to the E minor triad, which is now going to become 6, and then I do a 2. Now it's still sort of maybe ambiguous even, because it's kind of the 2 in G major could also be the 6 in C major. But then at this point, when I start playing the 5, 7, then I'm in the new key, right? So I'm in C major. Now I'm definitely in G major. So you can hear that there's maybe a little period of ambiguity at which, how are these chords functioning? Oh, wait a minute, I didn't do 2, I did 4. Never mind. Well, anyways, you get the idea. Like, how are these chords functioning? But then by the time you get to here, this is the first chord that's going to have the F sharp in it. You realize you're in the new key. And I like to think of this kind of like, you guys know how you cook lobsters? You put them in cold water alive, and then you slowly turn up the heat so that they don't realize they're being cooked. Sorry, I think that's not a good metaphor. But the idea is to get you slowly used to the new key, right? So that you don't realize that you're moving into a new key. That's the idea of it. Sorry, that's very true. But that's, whatever metaphor you can think of, kind of like slowly easing somebody into a new situation, that's what this is. It's not like, I'm in, like some modulations, hey, I'm in, C major, now I'm in D flat major, I'm a half step higher, that's very common modulation, But that's not this. This is sort of squeezing somebody into the key. Do you have a question, Ashley?
You answered.
Oh, okay. What, D flat major?
Like how gospel choirs and such
Yeah,
make
yeah.
an obvious change.
Uh-huh.
But I was gonna say that's not what we're like.
We call that a direct modulation, so, and usually that occurs at the end of a phrase, and that's where it happens in gospel chords, like this phrase goes da-da-da, or actually phrases, multiple phrases, blah, 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 and then new key, new phrase, new key, right?
Yeah.
And that's just a different kind of modulation, each has their own benefits and, things to it. Like, even, well, for example, these are all kind of common garden variety, common chord modulations, but you can use a secondary function as a common chord. So let's say, you're doing C major and then you do 5 of 6, and then use 5 of 6, which is what? 5 of 6, which is an E dominant 7th chord, to go to A major, maybe, That's a little simplistic. Well, something like that. I don't know, But you can use a secondary function as a common chord to get into a new key. And that'll typically get you into what we call more remote keys. So these are all closely related keys, but anything else is a remote key. So going from C major to A major is a remote key modulation. Like we're going way away. These are all 1 sharp or 1 flat away, but to go from 0 sharps to 3 sharps is a remote modulation. Now that's going to sound more different, right? That's going to sound more startlingly new to suddenly be in that new key. So all those things are about, they all have different, like I say, advantages and disadvantages. A common chord modulation into a closely related key is going to be kind of vanilla-ish, right? Whereas a remote a modulation to a remote key, maybe using something very startling like a specialized chord, like a Neapolitan or something, is going to sound more sudden and abrupt, but also maybe more like, ooh, that sounds cool, that sounds different, like I'm in a way new key, So it just depends on what you're doing. But this is kind of a first step in modulation. So you get the idea of that? All right, let's try some exercises with this. We've got this modulation exercise, and we can go through and think about what would be common chords in different keys that are going to work in new keys. And I will say that even though I have inversions in this exercise, the inversions don't really matter. It's just to make things a little more complicated. On the other hand, you sometimes do want to think about a baseline. Like, what is a baseline? Remember the inversions imply a baseline, so what is a certain baseline that would look like that actually might make a modulation sound a little bit more smooth than just jumping around, okay? But like if I'm in F major, and I'm going to go to C major, and so I do this 1-7-1, which is pretty common, right? It's just kind of, again, a way of establishing the key. And then I want to go to C major. What could I put in F major that would take me to C major, but that would also work with this 7-6? In other words, it's got to be something that's going to precede a 7 normally. What chord could I put? What chord is common to both F major or what chords? We just say what chords are common. Just throw some out there.
3.
The 3?
It doesn't work here, but it's
But in F major, the 3 is an A minor triad, right? Yeah, but that's not going to work in this progression, right? Because then that's 6 in C major, and that's not going to go like that. So what else do we have in common? Well, let's run through it. We have the 1 chord, the 4 chord, right? Or we could do another one, kind of boring, but 1, which would become 4, and 4-7 would work, right? We also have, so there's the 1, there's the 2 is the G minor triad in F major. That's not going to work, right? The 3, we already discarded the 3. The 4 is the B flat major triad, and that's not going to work because it's not common with C major. The 5 is the C major triad. That would be 5 and then 1 here, and that would work, right? The 6 is the D minor triad. That would be 6 here and 2 here. That would work, right? And then the 7 is not going to go. So what do you like? The D minor? Okay, yeah, which in F would be 6, right? That would be the 6th chord. So that would be 6. And then in C major, that's going to become 2, which is going to take us, then 2, 7, 1, 5, 6, 1 is going to work as a progression in the new key. Everybody got the idea? Make sense? Okay, let's take a look at the next one. What about this? So now we're going from a minor key to a major key. Now this is the F minor has 4 flats, A flat major has 4 flats, so it's just a related major. We're kind of, well, this is interesting. So what is going to follow 5, 7 in F major? 1, right? Normal, right? So if we put a 1 chord there, that's the F major, F minor. That's the F minor triad. In A flat, that would be what?
6.
It would be the sixth chord,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So then, does 6 go to 5? Not really, right? Yeah. But what else can follow 5/7? What else can follow the 5/7 chord besides 1? 1, or we have
6.
6. What is 6 in F minor? What's the root? D flat.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, D flat. What is D flat in A flat major? 4, right? So that would work, 4, 5, 1. So if we cadence deceptively to 6, which is a D flat major triad, and then we reinterpret that as 4 in A flat major, then that works as a modulation. So if we did something, you know, again, we're in F minor. I can't read that. So if we have an F minor progression, oh, we're going to go to 4, 5, 7. I'm going to go to inversion. And then we deceptively progress to, and then we can use the and 5, 6. Ended up in A flat, and it sounds convincingly like we arrived in A flat. Everybody okay with that? All right, let's try the next one. So we're going to go from D major to G major, so we're modulating to the subdominant, like 1 sharp less. And very normal progression in D major. And then we have 1, so we can pretty much pick anything. But we have to think about what can precede a 2 chord in G major. Right? That's probably the most critical point here. So what normally goes before 2? 6, right? So 6 in G major would be the E minor triad, right? What would that be in D major? 2. So we'll just go 2 and then reinterpret it as 6, and that's it. Any other possibilities?
You could try
Should
to
you do
do
like
4
4?
chord.
That can become 1.
Yeah.
What was that?
4, like the 4 chord, which would be
4 chord and then 1. Yes,
Yeah.
that would be another one. So let's think about it. Now that we're expanding. So going from 2 to 6 would work, or going from 4 and having it become 1 would work. Right? I don't think there are any other possibilities. The 6 chord in D isn't going to work. The D chord itself could work, you know, like you. No, sorry. Because that would be 5 and that's not. Never mind. Yeah. Okay. Next one. We're in B flat and we're going to G minor. So if we're in a major key and we've got 6, what's most likely to follow? 2, right? So what is the 2 chord in B flat?
C minor.
C minor, right? So does C minor work in G minor? How does it function in G minor?
The 4.
What?
The 4.
The 4, right? The C minor triad in G minor is the 4 chord, and 4/7 is a workable chord progression, right? So if we go to 2 here, 6 to 2, and then we reinterpret that as 4, then we can modulate 2. So again, something like, if this is our 5/7 going to 1, and then a 1/6, then our 6th chord, which is G minor, then our C minor chord, which we're now going to reinterpret, and then use that in a different key. Something like that. I have some notes, but okay. But you get the idea. Any other, really not too many other possibilities in terms, because see how this becomes rather restrictive, right? 6 can only go to so many different places, right? 6 could go to the 4 chord, let's say, right, in B flat, which would be the E flat chord, but then when we get over here, that doesn't make sense in terms of this progression. So sometimes you have some flexibility, other times, not. Now, and this is just an exercise, by the way, like if you're freely composing a chord progression that modulates, you've got a lot more options and opportunities, but you can also limit yourself. You can decide this is how I'm going to get there, and so this is the only one that's going to work. Stravinsky very famously said, like, the scariest part for me when composing is sitting down in front of the blank page. And then when I start to set my kind of like my restrictions, I forget what the word he used, but the limits that I'm going to use, then I feel much better about composition that starts to flow. And I sort of get that, right? Because if you just say everything's possible, all the notes, all the chords, everything, whatever, go ahead and do it, throw some stuff in there, it's kind of daunting, right? Like, oh my gosh, but then you start narrowing down what you're going to do, and it becomes easier. And so in some ways, some of this is that same way, right? Like understanding the restrictions, if you will, makes it a little bit easier to work with. Okay, now we're going from F sharp to C sharp, so from a minor key to its dominant minor. And we've got a progression here in F sharp, the thing goes 5, and then something else. What do you want to do?
Can you do 6? So we can become the 2.
You mean 6 here?
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to work because 6 here is going to be D major, right? Like a D major triad. And then when we go here, that's going to be like the 7 of the key, right? I'm sorry, the 7, no, the 2. But that's not the same chord, right? In C sharp, it's a D sharp. But what can follow this is 1, right, which is an F sharp minor triad. And then F sharp is going to be 4 here, which is going to move on. Yeah. But it's good to explore all the possibilities. So this is going to be 1, kind of, 1 is boringly 1, then 4, and that's it.
Yeah.
Also, sometimes boring is the best solution. I hate to say that.
Good to know.
Well, you'll find if you do writing, you'll be sometimes boring is the best solution. Either because people will accept it more readily, or because it's just easier for you. Yeah.
I have a question in number 2.
Uh-huh.
Would there be such a thing as from F minor to G sharp? Something like that, major, I don't know, harmonic, I'm trying to figure out.
Oh, an inharmonic modulation. I mean, well, usually when we talk about inharmonic modulation, we talk about chords being respelled inharmonically as common chords, as pivot chords. So like if you're in G minor and you would have an F sharp fully diminished 7th chord, right? That's the 7 diminished in G minor. So if I'm in G minor, this could be, G minor, the 7 diminished 7 is an F sharp diminished 7th chord, right? If I reinterpret that somehow, let's say instead as Okay, and that would be this chord. If I reinterpret that somehow, let's say as, that'd be more interesting. Like this chord. Like a C fully diminished seventh chord. And then, so this would normally go to G, right? This would normally go to D flat. So like a tritone way, you know. So yeah, that does happen. So you are inharmonically respelling a chord to move into a remote key. Usually inharmonic spellings are about remote key modulations. But it is possible. That's what, so these fully diminished seventh chord, just like, they are very flexible. I think I mentioned that last time. They can go in a lot of different directions. So you can use them in that way. But it depends on what you want to do.
So would it be a weird question, or would it be asked if, for question 2, if F minor would go to G sharp major or something like that, as an example? Like, how would you even solve
From
it?
F minor to G sharp major, like you
Or instead of A flat, whatever, it's the other way around.
Oh, I see. I see what you're asking. Well, yes, but kind of weird. You know, bear in mind that when you start writing keys that have everything sharp plus one double sharp, because that's what G sharp major is going to be, all the notes sharp and F double sharp, the performer is going to go, you know, it doesn't matter who they are, you know, they're going to start cringing at all of these sharps. And so it's probably better to do it in A flat.
But theoretically speaking, would that kind of question be asked, like just never?
Oh, yeah, maybe. Only in rare instances. I don't know, if I told you guys my Skopsky story, George Skopsky, he was a professor at CSUN. And so, I was, you know, it was when I was studying at Northridge, and I wanted to take this history of performance practice class that he was teaching, right? And it was a full class. It was like 30 students, and he thought that was probably twice as big as it should be. So he wanted to thin out the class. Well, he was an old, cranky musicologist, you know, bear that in mind. Good teacher, good smart man, you know, but kind of like, I don't know how to explain it. You know, but anyway, so he thought the class was too big, so he wanted to thin it out some. So the first day was a bunch of different, he just went around and put everybody on the spot asking them a difficult question, you know, to try and get them to go. And if they couldn't answer, he'd be like, well, maybe you should go back to Harmony 1 and study again, you know, like really belittling, you know. So one of the questions, not for me, but one of the questions was, spell me a German augmented sixth chord in G double sharp major. And, you know, okay, the augmented sixth chord you haven't even learned yet, that's a more advanced harmony. G double sharp major doesn't happen that often, really. It's a theoretical possibility. I mean, it's really A major, right? But, you know. So the person was like, and that's when he said, maybe you should go back to Harmony 1 and study. So and the class was smaller next time around, I can tell you. That's the only time I think a question like that is going to come. In practical music, no, nobody's going to write. If you write a piece in G double sharp major and put it down in front of Brandy, he's going to be like, what are you doing to me? You'd be like, why? Why are you putting me through this when I could just play it in A major? Do you see what I'm saying? So it's a theoretical thing, and yes, it might come up on some sort of like specialized example.
Professors, and it's been challenging how to maneuver to get to that answer. But and then if it's not in the main keys we're learning, how do we how do we like work through it?
Yes, okay, well, you think quickly, you say, so G double sharp major is A major. So what is a German augmented sixth chord in A major? That would be an F dominant seventh chord. Be a chord built on F, because the augmented sixth chord is built on the lower sixth scale group. So then you say to yourself, okay, it would be F, A, C, D sharp, not E flat, because that's the augmented sixth, right? You already learned this, but this would be the chord in, and there'd be some naturals here too, because you're in, that would be the chord in A major. Then you translate all of that back to G sharp, double sharp major. Is it double sharp or G sharp? Well, so this would be E sharp, right? This would be G double sharp. This would be B sharp, and this would be C double sharp. That's how you. So you think of the key you do know, and then move it back into the key that you don't know. That's something like if you guys took 200 with me, like interval, like I'd say, write a major third above D sharp, and you're like, well, there's no key at D sharp. What do I do? Well, you could also use the key of E flat, and a major third above. That's G, right? Then how do you spell G in the context of a third above? Well, it's like that. So put it into a key that you do know and work it through, and then put it back into the inharmonic key. That kind of situation is very rare, though. I'm not sure how to come down on that. On the one hand, I think it's good to have that flexibility and be able to work out those problems. On the other hand, again, practical music, don't do it. Even if you're the greatest composer in the world, if you put something like that down in front of musicians in a recording session, they're going to be upset with you. Even if they play it, like if they're pros and they can read, like they can sight read, like, they're going to play it. They're not going to be happy. Do you understand what I'm saying? And you're going to get a better performance if they're happier. You're going to get a better performance if you don't ask them to do unreasonable things. So you always kind of have to consider that in the context of writing music, like if you're a composer. Because, again, if you've got some great, intellectual plan and it all makes sense, that can work, But if it's just because you don't like working in F major, you'd rather work in E sharp major, nobody's going to be happy, You understand what I'm saying? And then also you really have to think about, what am I doing? If you're writing a film score and you're going in front of an orchestra that's used to playing stuff, kind of like by sight, and you're making them work in E sharp major, it's just not probably likely going to go that way, So what am I doing here? So just always think about those things. On the other hand, if you're a famous composer and you're just other story. Sorry, I'll do one more story. So Stravinsky, again, back to there's a music festival up in Ojai, a classical new music festival that happens in Ojai every year. And this is a long time ago. This is in the 70s, or maybe in the 60s. But Stravinsky had written some music, and he was there rehearsing it. He was conducting it and rehearsing it. And he had written a note for the oboe that was this. Now the oboe's lowest note is this. So at one point in the rehearsal, the oboist raised his hand and said, Maestro, I have an A in my score and I can't play any on my instrument. And Stravinsky said, I don't care, I want an A. So when Stravinsky says, I don't care, I want an A, you figure out how to do it. What he did was he put a roll of paper in the bottom of his horn to kind of extend the length of the instrument, and got the A out when it was required. I don't know what he did about the other notes, if he was I'm not sure, but that's the story I heard, that he put a kind of roll up piece of paper in there to extend the length of the instrument, get the lower note. for the time that he needed to do it for Stravinsky. But no oboist will do that for you in a recording session, right? They will say, what the hell are you talking about? You know, like you can't ask me that. Write it for English horn if you want that A, you know, write it for a different instrument. English horn is the longer, the oboe but longer, anyways. So that's you know, that's the smart, and that's a smart way to do it, anyways. If that's the note you want, a lot of oboists will double on English horn. They'll have it there, and they'll just, you know, boom, boom, boom. You know, I don't know. I'm just saying. So you can't ask musicians to do unreasonable things, where they'll get kind of weird about it. You know? And they will respect you if you know how to write for them, if you know what to do for them. You know, so the same situation if you write an oboe part, but you want an A at some point, and you're going to give it to an English horn player, but you give the oboist enough time to put down his oboe, pick up his English horn, get ready, play the A, then put it back down again, pick up the oboe later on. If you got that all worked into the piece, they're going to be like, you know, this person knows what they're doing, you know.
If there's time later, could you, I know this is hypothetical, doesn't happen often, but if you could find, like, what I asked earlier about F minor, instead of B flat, or A sharp, major, or G minor, things like that.
I'm sorry,
Sorry, we did B flat major to G minor, for example. Could we do an harmonic and see how that works, and how you showed us how it translates over later on?
yeah, maybe, yeah, again, I'm not sure how.
I just
Useful.
want to see how it works.
Yeah, okay.
Later on, yeah.
Okay, let's go on. Okay, so now we're going to go from D minor to F major. Yeah. How do you want to do this? Well,
We could do 6 to 2. Wait. Yeah, 6 to 2.
6 to, well, you mean 6 in D minor.
Yeah, 6
What's it going to become in F major?
to 2.
No,
Wait.
close. Similar chord. 6, which is B flat,
Yeah.
is going to become 4 in F
Yeah.
major. Right. They're both predominant harmonies.
Yeah.
But it's okay. Yeah, so we would do D minor, and then we'd deceptively progress to 6, and then use that 6 as 4, and then move along. Same thing as we saw earlier about the progression. 6 is going to become 4. And there's really no other way to do that, because 5 to 1, which would be D minor, is going to come in 6, and again, that progression is not going to work in F major. What about number 7? I really only see one possible one there. No, actually, wait a minute, sorry. Well, what could follow the 5? 1, and 1 would become what in E major? 4, which would work, right? Okay, what else could follow 5? 6, which would be an F sharp minor tread, which would become what? 2, which would also work, right? So we have those two options. So we could even think about it something like this, like, if it's 1, then it's going to become 4. If it's 6, it's going to become 2. Does that work for everybody? Okay. What about this last one? That is the last one. Yeah. Well, if I'm in, a major key and I have a 3 chord, there's really only 2 things that can come next, right? One would be 6, right? The 6, and what is 6 in D flat?
B flat?
Sorry? B flat, yeah, B flat. So a B flat minor triad, in F that would be the 4 chord, right? So that would work. What else can follow the 3? 4, right? So 4 chord is a G flat, which would be not part of F minor at all, right? So that's not going to work. So we're going to have to do the 6 chord, which would be B flat, and then that's going to become 4. So you see a lot of the same patterns playing out, right? Like 6 being reinterpreted as 4, or 6 being reinterpreted as 2. Because we're moving to closely related keys, those kind of relationships are going to play out over and over again, regardless of the key. It's good to be aware of, these spellings in different keys, right? To know what they are. And that's why fluency in all the keys, like knowing what chords are what in what key, is really important. But again, these kind of relationships will play out over and over again in terms of the music. And that's just kind of the math of it, right? If you take 2 keys, there's only so many chords that are going to be in common between the 2 keys that you can use for a common chord modulation. So do you get the hang of it? And it makes sense in terms of how to do this. All right, so let's do some analysis, look at some music. And actually, I have audio files for these. This is going to be interesting. Sorry, it's going to take me a minute to sign in here. So. I just thought it'd be nice to listen to these modulations as well as analyze them. And I think with modulation also too, it actually is important to kind of like hear what's going on. Well, I guess it's important with all music, but question is, will these play or will we get all that horrible noise we had before? Let me try that again. So this is the first example. Kind of quiet. Not exactly the effect I wanted, but it's pretty much back. I think the other one would be better. This is kind of just a cheesy synthesis. Wait, I'm sorry, let me try one of these other ones. Let's see if,
It's a really loud speaker.
oh. Just coming out.
I know what you're talking about. It's happened before.
Yeah.
Oh, are we?
Where it gives that loud voice.
I'm scared. I like the last one. Oh my. I'm scared. Huh? Same.
All right, well, maybe it's not gonna happen so much.
Okay.
Do you want me to turn off the audio so you know? That's so weird. Okay, well, we'll just analyze. I'll mute this. Okay. So when analyzing something that modulates, again, you first kind of want to look at the whole thing, right? Like where it starts and where it goes to. So in looking at this, where do you think we're starting? What key do you think we're in? G, right? Yeah, probably G. I mean, 1 sharp is G, and this is a G major triad here. And so we kind of look, we see, you know, like a D major triad, D major. So kind of some, you know, G major, not D minors. But then we start seeing C sharps toward the end here. Okay, well, that's probably a modulation. And then we cadence on a D major triad here, right? So probably from G major to D major, which would be from the tonic to the dominant key, very likely. So then, when you're thinking about modulating, what we usually do is we find a place where it's definitely in the new key, and then we look for the pivot chord or the common chord just before that. Now this will be a little tricky because there's some stuff happening on the 8th notes here, right? But that might be a place to talk about a common chord, because everything up before that is pretty much in G major. But we'll start at the beginning, we'll head towards D major, and we'll see where to find our common chord, but let's analyze from the beginning, okay? Just to get some good practice in analysis. So we're in G major, and as I said, this is a 1 chord. And then what is this chord here on the second beat? 5, yeah. And what inversion?
6, 5, 6.
Sorry?
5, 6.
5, 6, yeah, first inversion, yeah. So 5, 6. And then that E would be like a passing tone, right? The next chord would be what? 5 also, yeah. You could talk about 5, 7 because of the C in the tenor part there. But you could also call that a passing tone. Just 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I'm just going to call it passing tone. And then the next chord would be 1, yeah. And the 2 notes in the bass and tenor here, again, are just passing tones. There's really no way to make sense of A and C when you've still got G and D ringing in the upper voices, right? So, except as non-chord tones. So they would be, again, just more passing tones. On the way to this next chord, which is what? 1, 6, yeah, good. And then, on the first beat of this measure, 4, good, yeah. Now, just so we come up against something that I told you not to do in Harmony 1, right? Cross voices. So the basses are still on C, even as the tenors are heading down here, and now the basses are up on D, even as the tenors are going below them. That we call cross voices, remember? So when the tenor goes below the basses, or the basses go above the tenors, or however you want to put it, we call it cross voices. I told you not to do that. Usually it's avoided, but it's Bob. He decided to do it. Probably because he wanted the tenors to do this line for some reason or another. Okay? So you can see how the tenor's going like fa, mi, re, sol, sol, sol. Like, might make sense. So but it's not going to make any difference in terms of our analysis. Right? This is still a 4 chord. This is still a passing tone. The C going down to the B, going down to the A, which is going to become the bottom note of this next chord. What's the next chord? 5, yeah. What inversion?
Second?
Uh,
Or is it?
7 with the C.
Oh, 5, 7.
It could be 5, 4, 3. We could call it. Right. That would be a second. Because the A is the 5th of the chord is the lowest sounding pitch. And with the C there, we could call it 5, 4, 3. Otherwise, it'd be 5, 6, 4.
Oh, have a question. You said it's the lowest sounding pitch, but it's not in the bass, it's in the tenor.
Right. But it's always, we always figure from the lowest sounding pitch, not from the bass voice. Don't confuse those two. Okay? Basses is a voice type or an instrumental type, but the lowest sounding pitch is how we figure the inversions. Okay? So yeah, let's call this 5-4-3, and then that accounts for all the notes there, including the C that is not a passing tone, it's part of this chord. And then what's the next chord? 1, yeah. And then
5, 6?
5-6, yep. Now we get into kind of weird territory. We're going to think ahead a little bit, just kind of with some of our other analysis, you have to be aware of what's going on. So on the very downbeat here, what does that look like in terms of like a root name and quality?
E minor?
An E minor, yeah, E minor. So in G major, E minor would be 6, right? In D major, which we know we're heading towards, that would be 2. So they're a pretty good common chord, right, to do something. Now the C sharp right after that does throw a little monkey wrench into things. But once we get the C sharp, then we have E, G, G, and C sharp, which is a chord in the new key, right? If this is 2, and then when we get to this beat, what would this be with the C sharp in D major?
Yeah, can you?
Yeah. The last part of beat 1, so the end of beat 1, we have E, G, G, and C sharp. What would that be in D major? 7. Yeah. So if this we reinterpret as 2, then to follow it with 7 makes sense, right? So if we say this is 6 in G major, we are now going to say in D major it's 2. Then on the very next 8th note, we have 7 diminished 6. Sorry, it gets a little crowded in there right now. We'll just scrunch the Roman numerals in there as best we can.
So once now we're in D major, the C sharp is, now we're just going to think as D major, we're not going to think as G major, saying C sharp is a passing tone.
Yeah, you don't want to think, you want to interpret it in the new key. Don't worry about the old key anymore. Yeah, and it just. So then, and then 7 to 1, right? In D major makes sense. And then this next chord here,
2, 6?
2-6. And then the F is just going to be another passing tone. And then the next one,
5.
5,
5, 7?
5, 7, yeah, because the G there is our 7th, so 5, 7 position, and then 1. Does that make sense? So you see how you have to, like, you have to take a chord, kind of hold its purposes in both keys in your head, how it's going to function. And then once you've figured that out, you can kind of head off in the new key. But again, the idea behind, at least behind analyzing analysis, analyzing music, modulating examples, is to find the place where, like you're definitely not in G major anymore. And then move back one, and that should be where you find your common chord. Okay, that's the technique. Doesn't always work, but most of the time that will work in a common chord modulation. Okay, let's look at the next one. All right. So this is a piano piece, and actually there's this first phrase that modulates, because you can see it starts in G major and then has some C sharps here, right? Then just repeats itself. So actually the first phrase up to here, where it cadences in the new key, then after that it just repeats itself again. So we'll just analyze the first part, okay? We won't analyze all this other stuff. This is the literal repeat. And I left off the last measure, which is that one there. But that's the idea. Okay? All right, so again, taking the longer view, if we hear a cadence here, then we're modulating from what? G to D, yeah, right? Because we can kind of see a cadence in D major happening here. C sharps again, not unexpected. So we're going to go from G to D, G major. The first chord there is a one chord. You have a question?
Yes, because still related, kind of. So instead of composers, like you said, making a drastic change, they're like easing their way with modulation instead of a direct key change.
Right.
Is that why it's not written as a key change?
Oh, good question. Good question. Yeah. No, yeah, the idea is that you are, well, one is that it's not drastic, that's right. But also, you're not going to be there forever. You're going to come back to the original key. And see, this one is even like, starts in G, goes to D, then starts in G again, then goes to D again. So you're kind of running over the same territory. But there, I'll tell you, in traditional common practice harmony, the idea actually usually is like these travels to other keys are only temporary. You are eventually going to come home. 95% of the time, that's what's happening. Okay? So, it's not like, there are some songs like in more modern things, I don't know about gospel music, but
No.
more modern pieces where, no, but seriously, they start in one key and end in another key and that's it. The songs are done, But that's not the aesthetic in this time period. The idea is like, I'm here, but I'm going to go to other
You're
keys.
visiting, but then you come back.
Right, exactly, but I'm going to come back to the... And even the idea that a listener who hears you start in one key and then finish in a different key and then the piece ends would be disturbed by that, right? Because they're like, well, wait a minute, I want to hear G major again, what happened to G major, right? So there's some of that idea. It's an aesthetic. It's not it's not the right way or the wrong way. It's just the way that they viewed it. A lot of this stuff was developed during the classical era, which had a definite balance, structure aesthetic, a very structural aesthetic to it. And so having an overarching key that everything fit into was more logical. Right? Okay. What's the next chord that's there? And I'm still looking even at the 16th note. I know 16th note is, you could just say something like passing tones, but there is a legitimate harmony that's happening there.
1/6.
What?
1/6.
Well, there's a 1/6 here, yeah. But I'm talking about the 8 notes. So as we move from the 1 to the 1/6, these can be described functionally. So if we look, we have A, G, and
See?
oh wait a minute, I was thinking it the wrong way. Like a 2, 7. Yikes.
No.
1, 2, 1 doesn't function. Okay, passing code. I was thinking like an A dominant seventh, which might have a sort of like
No,
passing quality, but no, not. Okay, passing code. And then, well, sorry, the G would just be a repeated note. Okay, what about this beat here?
4?
4? Yeah. And then
1/6?
1/6. And then
Is that going to 7?
7.
That's a-
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, so, if we just take these notes here and we put the A in the middle there, then we have F sharp, A, and C, which in G major would be the F sharp diminished or the 7 diminished. The A puts it in first inversion, so it would be a 7 diminished 6. And then it moves on to 1, yeah. And that's a pretty common function for this 7 diminished, is to kind of be like a passing chord between our first inversion and our root position 1 or the other way around. Okay, what about the next chord on this beat here? Five, 5, 7, yeah. Yeah, because the C in the tenor part is the 7, so that would be 5. And it's just root position 5, 7. And then it resolves to 1, right? So, pretty common garden variety chord progression. It's a 4-measure phrase. It's 1, 1, 6, 4, 1, 6, 7, 6, 1, 5, 1. Real simple, basic harmony. This is Schumann, by the way, from a collection of like children's pieces. Have you ever played these, Brandon? At Kinderday? Okay, so then what about this and this is the same thing, right? So we can just do 1 and 1, 6 and call these passing tones. He continues on by using the same 4 chord again, right? It's the same major 4. Another 1, 6. But now things get interesting. Because we see the C sharp that shows up here, and that's different, right? That's something outside of the key. So we know that once we find the chord that is in the new key, right, then we want to look backwards or something like that. So if we're going to D major, how would we interpret this chord in D major? 7, right? C sharp, E, G is a 7 diminished. So can we reinterpret this chord as something that would make sense in terms of a 7 in the new key? Well, this is a G major triad. What is that in D major? 4. Does 4, 7 make sense? Yes, right? So, we'll do this. We're in D major now. This is a 4, 6 going to a 7 diminished. And this, I don't think I really mentioned this, but so this is how we do these like how we mark these modulations. So when you've got like the old key, and then whatever, you know, then the new key. Then once you've got that exchange going on, then you start after that back on the same level as the original, not like shifting down a level. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because if you had multiple modulations, you could end up like 3 layers or 4 layers below, so you don't want to do that. Okay, so this is 7, then this is 1, yep. And then 5, 7. Yeah, is that A? Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty much an A dominant 7. A, C sharp, E, G. Maybe the treble clef. But yeah, 5, 7 in D major, right? This is all in D major. So everything 7 D major, 1 D major, 5, 7, and then 1 D major. This is kind of like a classic common chord modulation, and a kind of a classic modulation setup where you have a 4-measure phrase that cadences in the original key to kind of say, okay, this is my key, I'm in G major. Then here's my second 4-measure phrase, and by the time I get into that, I've finished in a new key. Like those of you who are going to write the minuets in Harmony 2, that's a really common thing. Sometimes there's a little bit of a phrase extension, but that's a very common way to modulate in a minuet format. To do like this 4-measure phrase, establish the key, then another 4-measure phrase that modulates to the new key, probably the dominant, and you're in. Yeah, then you go into the B section. Okay, and we won't analyze the rest of this because again, it's just a literal repetition of this, and if we had that one last measure there, it would be the same as that first measure.
Well, I know it's a repetition, but what would be in the D major, just the next measure?
Oh, I'm sorry, that is a good question, because it does go back to G major, right? So we're suddenly back to G major. So what we would do is just put the G and start doing this sort of thing again. And that kind of gets to what I was talking about earlier. Remember when we were talking about direct modulations? So this is a common chord modulation. This is a direct modulation. Because it just ends, one phrase ends in D major, and the next phrase starts in G major. And I think I did mention it. So with direct modulations, usually it occurs between 2 phrases. Like you'll have a phrase cadence and end in one key, and then another phrase starts in a new key. That's really typical with a direct modulation. Good question. Yeah. And the way you analyze that is to just say, you know, like, okay, I'm in a new key, boom. Okay. Next example. All right, so this is the opening of a sonata, or actually the last movement of the sonata. And, well, what we will do is we will analyze just up to the delta bar here. Okay, because that's where the modulation takes place. And if we look at it, we start in what key?
Well, if we look at the key signature, it's G.
Yeah, well, there is a key signature. But, so 1 sharp is either G major or E minor. What do we think this is? E minor, right? Yeah, because the E minor triad is being outlined here in the left hand of the piano, right? We also see the D sharp a little bit later on, so that would be the harmonic minor, right? So pretty much E minor. But when we get down to here, what do we see in terms of a cadence? G major, right? You know, this is a G major chord here. If we were to look here, we would see like a D dominant 7th. So that's a pretty good indication that we've modulated into G major, which would make sense, right? E minor, G major, totally makes sense in terms of a modulation. So we go from E minor to G major, from the minor to the relative major. Again, very common modulation. Not at all unexpected. So we'll modulate that way. What we'll want to look at some point is, you know, like once we stop seeing these D sharps, is start looking for a place where we can find a common chord between the two different keys. Okay. But let's start at the beginning. So, and we'll look mostly at the left hand of the piano because that's where the harmony is outlined. We can see some notes here, but like in this measure, we'll be looking up above, but you can kind of get an idea of what's going on just by looking at the left hand of the piano, okay? So what about the first measure in terms of E minor? What harmony is that? 1, yeah. Any non-chord tones? The A, yeah. Just the A, which is a passing tone, right? Otherwise, everything else, like in the left hand of the piano, this is all E minor triad stuff. The G, the B, and the A are all part of the E minor triad. It's only the A that's the non-chord tone. Okay, now what about this measure here? And again, I think we can kind of just look at that. Let's see what that is. What was it?
564.
6/4?
Oh, wait. 5. 543.
5/4/3, yeah. Because so if we look at, let me do this in basic notes. So we've got these notes going on, which are going to be B, F, and A, right? That's our left hand of the piano. Then we've also got the D sharp up here, which fits in here. So that gives us a B dominant 7th, which in the key of E minor is 5/7. When the F sharp is the lowest sounding pitch, it's 4/3. So this we'll call 5/4/3. Any non-chord tones? No, actually not. Yeah, okay. Next measure. It's just one again, yeah. Which makes sense, right? 5, 1, 1, 5, 1, 1, 5, 4, 3. All that's really happening is this, you know. But then in the second half of the measure, things change, right? That's clearly a change in harmony there. What is that? I'm sorry? 5, 6, yeah. Now that's just the triad, right? It's not the 7 chord because there's no A in there, but it's you know, the 5 chord would be B, D sharp, F sharp, so that's all the notes there, but the D sharp is the lowest sounding pitch, which is the third of the chord, so that's our 5, 6. Up above, we only have F sharp in the soprano line, so that's also good, right? Okay, what about the next harmony and the next measure?
Can it be a 1?
1, yeah. And then the next harmony, we'll get to the non-chord tone as soon as we finish the measure.
Going back to the 5, so it's 5.
5, yeah, just plain old 5, because the B is the lowest sounding pitch in this case, so it's root position 5. Again, on the piano, we're going to kind of think like, even if we hear, we're going to think that low B, that's going to be our kind of, because probably, you know, there's going to be some pedal involved, or even if there wasn't pedal, we'd still, the oral effect of the low B is to make us think of root position. Okay, so that's 5. Now what about the A up there? That's not part of the 1 chord. What kind of a non-chord tone is it? Appoggiatura. Good, yeah. Approach by lead, left by step. So appoggiatura. Okay, next measure. 1, yeah. And what is the A in there?
Passing tone?
Passing tone, yeah. Okay. Now, like, again, we've got kind of our first 4-measure phrase here. A little bit longer. But we maybe want to start thinking about, you know, where we modulate. So start looking ahead, think about where the modulation might be occurring. So I won't write anything down until we kind of sketch this out, let's say. Okay, so in this measure here, what kind of harmony do we have? Again, if you want to just say root name and quality, we've got C and A and E and A and C and A and E and A. 4, yes, 4, which is an A minor triad, right? Okay, so we've established that. That's A minor and 4 chord. What about this one here? Like again, maybe just look at the left hand, but you can also look at the right. It's a D7, right? It's a D dominant 7th chord. D and C and A, and then the F sharp from the, that all fits in there, right? Does that make sense? So if you think about it, sometimes it's helpful to even just, like we could sketch out D and F sharp from the top, and then the A comes later, and the C, that's a D dominant 7th chord. So that's more in the new key, right? We know we're heading towards G major. That's really more in the new key. So probably this is not a good pivot chord, even though it's common to both keys. This chord does exist in the key of E minor. But we kind of want to look again for the more ambiguous chord, the one that can form sort of a bridge between the two keys, not the one that is definitely in the new key. So if we think about A minor, is there a way of interpreting that in both keys that will work for us? So A minor in E minor is 4, right? What is it in G major? 2, right? And 2, 5, 1 is going to work for us, right? So that's the perfect way to interpret this, is to say, okay, this A minor chord, which is 4, and it's in first inversion, right? Because the C is the lowest sound. It's 4 in the old key, is going to become, in the new key, 2, 6, and then we'll go to 5, 7, and then go to 1. And so what I'm kind of trying to point out is you do need to look ahead a bit to determine, if you just analyze chord by chord by chord by chord, you're likely to say, well, I'm in E minor, this is 4, this is 7, right? This is like capital 7, 7, this is 3. And it doesn't make as much sense as if you say, well, I know I'm modulating, so where can I find the pivot chord, the common chord? How can I interpret that so that it makes sense in terms of a modulation? You have to kind of, bear both of those things in mind. It's almost like seeing multidimensionally, better seeing into the future, which musicians do. So that's a good example of that. You really have to kind of look ahead to see the logic in the new key. Everybody okay with that? All right. Now the string quartet. So again, this is the first part. Oh, this is the first part of a minuet, but it follows that same kind of format of here's a phrase in one key. All right, now we're going to modulate. Here's a phrase in the new key, and we're going to end in the new key. So 2 sharps is what? D major or B minor. Okay. So what do you think for this opening part here? What key are we in? B minor, yeah. One thing would be, sol, do in B minor, right? Like the F sharp to the B is sol to do. Another thing would be to look here and see this is a B minor triad. So that's all good indication that it's B minor. You could, again, look a little further and say, okay, well, there's A sharp there, so probably that too. But even those opening kind of gestures are very B minor-ish. Then as we look towards the end of this whole excerpt, we can see a D major triad there. So again, we're going from the minor key to its relative major, very common. Almost like again, I was talking before about expectations. If I started in B minor, I'm probably going to go to D major if there's a modulation. So don't start in B minor and say, well, maybe it goes to C sharp minor for some bizarre reason, or no, it's probably not going to happen. Okay, so we're going to start out in B minor, and we'll start looking for clues as we get closer to D major as to what's going on there. What's the first chord here? 1. Is it an inversion? Yes. Right. Because what's that note in the viola? D. Good. Yes. C clefs, always good for you. It's like eating your spinach or something. Okay, what about the next chord here? Two, yeah, I'm gonna say two. And it's not gonna make sense, so but we have two notes of the two chord. We have the C sharp and the E. Then we've got another C sharp. Doesn't really, help us, but it does seem like it's a two chord. But then the next chord is what? Here. It's one, yeah. Yeah, it's a 1-2-1 progression. Not really happy with Haydn for doing that, but another way to think, I think you could just say there's a 1-6 and a 1 and these are passing tones. That would be another way to maybe do it. Another thing would be to say, like, this is sort of like a 7 diminished, right? These are the top two notes. I'm sorry, the fifth and the third and the fifth of a 7 diminished, but the seventh, the 7 is not there. The A sharp is not there. It's really hard to interpret that chord as that when, like, one of the key notes is not there. This kind of, I would say this also kind of points to, like when we teach you this stuff in harmony, like this is the progression rules and this is how it goes, blah, blah, blah. And then you get into real music. Real music doesn't always work out quite so simply. Let's just put it that way. Okay, so what about this next harmony here? Two. Yeah, now we're talking two, right? We have all the notes. We have the E, the G, and the C sharp. Those are all part of the two chord. And is it in inversion?
Yes, 6.
Yeah. So it's a 2 diminished 6.
Question about the grace notes. Do we consider those non-chord tones? The grace note?
I'm sorry? Oh,
Do we consider that a non-chord tone?
the
grace note?
D there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of wonder about that. I mean, so this is a grace note, right? If you see a little eighth note like that with a line through it, that's a grace note. In performance terms, the grace note is played before the beat, right? It's that was not really stylistic at the time period, and I kind of wonder if this edition didn't misinterpret that. What you might normally write is a little eighth note like that, but without the line through it, which would be what we call an appoggiatura. That's sort of another interpretation of the name appoggiatura. But in that case, the D would occur on the beat, and it would take up its value from the C, probably half its value.
That's if we don't have the cross, or we have the cross? You said
I'm sorry?
The cross out.
With the cross out, it's a grace note. With a little strike through it, it's a grace note. Without the strike through it, it's an appoggiatura. The appoggiatura is more stylistic at this time period, and I kind of wonder if the editors didn't screw it up. But it's not impossible that Haydn was using a grace note in this. So I don't know. But I think we should analyze it as a non-chord tone because it's not part of the chord. Although if it was a grace note, it would come, again, before the beat, and so it would technically not be occurring when the chord was there. But let's say it is a non-chord tone, what would you call it? Well, it's sort of like a suspension, right? It's a held over note that's resolved down by step. So a suspension, especially if it was an appoggiatura, it would definitely be a suspension.
So you're saying if it's a grace note, then it's considered as a non-chord tone?
I'm sorry?
If D is a grace note, then we do not consider it as.
Yeah, I would consider it a non-chord tone for the grace note. Yeah, because grace note is an ornamental tone. Yeah. Now, looking here, does the harmony change at all? It's pretty much the same, right? I mean, these notes, the E and the G are done all the way through here. The C sharp is featured all the way through here. The only difference is the B, which would be like a lower neighbor, right? And then the D again, which would be an upper neighbor. So it's, in other words, my point is, it stays 2 all the way through for those 2 measures. It's like an extended diminished harmony with the B being a neighbor tone, the D now being another neighbor tone. Okay. Next picture. Hmm? 5/7, yeah. So in B minor, the dominant would be built on F sharp, right? So then we have F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, and E. It's all there in the lower strings. So that would be 5/7. And that pretty much continues. The F, the E, and the C are all part of the chord. The D is not part of the chord, so that would be the passing tone. So, in the first part of this measure, this chord is voiced like this. In the second one, the viola shifts to A sharp, right? And then we have A sharp in the second violin and A sharp in the viola, and those A sharps should resolve up to tonic, and they do. So Haydn has parallel octaves. You know what? I'm gonna mark that as wrong here. And Haydn gets a B on his string set. I think I'm not sure why he would even do that. Like, why not just hold on to the C and resolve it down to the B that way? That kind of baffles me. I mean, in terms of common practice harmony and stuff, right? Like, Haydn will do what Haydn will do. I'm telling you, but that seems weird to me. I'm not sure why he would even bother to do that. Maybe he's still on. Okay. And then this here is what? 1, yeah. And even, the next chord is 1, right? Before we start off onto the next phrase. We cadence on 1, but this is still a 1, right? Okay, now, what is this chord here? And if you want to just go for a root name and quality, that would be fine.
It can't be a 7 because there's no A sharp.
Well, so if it's a 7 without the sharp, well, let's just inventory here for a minute. All right, so, A, right? E, G, and C sharp. What is that chord? A7. Since we know we're modulating to D major, that chord has significance for us, right? Now, but if we say, okay, well, that's in the new key, right? That's 5/7 in the new key, and we back up. This, if we're looking for a common chord, this is 1 in the old key and 6 in the new key, and 6 to 7 doesn't really make sense, right? In terms of analysis. So we're going to have to use this as our common chord, even though I wouldn't necessarily, because the next thing that's going to happen is it's going to resolve to a D chord. Okay? So at that point, we don't have a lot of choice. We're going to have to say that this is the 7 chord in B minor, but in D major, that's going to become 5/7. Okay. And then that music is repeated down here again, right? It's the same thing. And so put this is a suspension. This is a neighbor. This is another neighbor. So here's the $64,000 question. Have you seen this music somewhere before?
Which part are you pointing to?
This measure and this measure. Does it look familiar?
Yeah, third measure.
Yes. Which measure? Measure.
Is it the third one? Can't really see well.
You're nodding.
I'm nodding because I hear the answer behind me.
Oh.
Rain.
What is it? What do you?
Oh, the measure with the 2/6 chord.
Yeah. So these two measures, right, and these two measures are the same except for
New key. No E sharp.
well. So this and this is the same, right? This and this is the same. This and this is the same. This and this is not the same. Right? And same thing is here. This and this is the same. This and this is the same. This and this is the same. The A is added. So if we take a look at this chord, well, I'm going to leave it this way. This is a C sharp diminished triad, right? This is an A7. In the key of B minor, this is 2, right? In the key of D major, this becomes a 7. So heightened modulates, puts us into the new key by repeating the same music, but then just adding this A below. Pretty brilliant, in my opinion. And so in a way, even though this might seem kind of abrupt, because we're suddenly interpreting this 7/7 as a 5/7, it's a really, again, a very subtle way of modulating, because he's repeating the same music but adding one new note that changes the context, changes the way you're going to understand that chord. And it's going to kick you into D major, because now it's an A dominant 7th instead of a C sharp diminished 7th. I think, you know what, you've got like Haydn and Mozart, right, in the classical era, and you start out finding Mozart totally fascinating, it's wonderful. And then you realize how great Haydn is. And yeah, really interesting music. Okay, so we reinterpret that, that's 5/7, 5/7. What's this here? 1.
1/6.
Yeah, 1/6. Good. Yep. 1/6, and then 1 here on this measure, right? Like that's D and A and D and then F sharp up there, so that's a 1. Oops. Root position 1. This is passing to. Okay, then what about this here?
5/6/5.
5,
6/5.
6/5, yeah, because the C sharp, the cello part is still the lowest on the pitch, 5/6/5. But also notice, like these two inner parts, the same figuration as this, right? You just repeating, using the same melodic material, but reinforcing the modulation. 5/6/5 to 1, and then we'll just, like, that's a 1/6 right there, just a switch for the version. This measure. Well, G, E, C sharp, A,
5/4/2.
5/4/2, yeah. And 5/4/2 is normally going to resolve to a 1/6, right? Because the 7th in the bass will go down by a step to the 3rd of the chord, which is going to give us a 1/6. And then even though here we've only got the D and the F sharp, I mean, this is kind of murky up here as to what the chord is, but I would still say this is 1 only. Now because of the D, I'd interpret it as position 1. But the appearance of the B makes things a little different. Four.
About the next one, sure.
Well, when we get to here, you know, this is G, B, B, and good lord.
G.
G. So probably 4 chord here, but I was more thinking about this part here, you know, like B and B, E, like 2, E, but then 2 to 4, E. It's kind of, I mean, again, it's kind of hard to squeeze these into a specific harmonic box. Yeah, so I would go more for something like 4/6, And then 4. So that we don't have a change of like 2 to 4, which would be quote unquote illegal. But not completely off base. And then this looks kind of 2-ish, right? The E and the G. So maybe a 2/6 there. But at least by the time we get to the end of this measure, we can say, thank God, 5/7, right? Something definite harmonically. And then 1. Yeah, sometimes, analysis, like, squeezing it into that analytical box that you want to make it fit everything that normally works is difficult. Like I said, when you get into real music, things get difficult, it gets more challenging to fit it into that analytical box. But you just kind of want to make sense of it. Remember the goal of analysis is to kind of help you hear and understand it better. Not necessarily to come up with some definite answer. And certainly not, sometimes the implication is, and this is not totally off the wall, but like understanding the composer's intentions. You don't want to get too much in that mindset because you probably can't understand the composer's intentions. So you can't know. It's a path towards, but it's not really. So don't think that really is. Don't mistake analysis for the composer's intention. That's always a problem. All right, any questions about this? You got a good handle on modulation? It's okay. Again, you got to come back to these ideas and come back to these ideas and come back to them until they're thoroughly ingrained.